And now let's talk about some of the things you can do mentally to increase your motivation. So, some of the ways that we think and the ways that we stay organized. The first mental hack that I usually recommend for people is track what you do. Now, if you're studying alone, you don't have a study partner of any kind, or you're not in a study group, super important to get this one right. Track your progress. Just keep a simple journal of what you do each day, not like a diary, but just kind of write down what you did very briefly. And it's just almost magical. Anything that we track, we're going to improve more than if we don't track it. And I think this works because by tracking something, it brings into the forefront what we're actually doing. And if you don't track something, it can be kind of easy to hide what you're doing from yourself a little bit, right? Because you'll kind of forget, and it's very easy to forget after a week has gone by exactly what you did, right? So track it, get it down in a journal. Could be online, could be in paper, doesn't matter. But do track your progress and review, what you've done each week. Second thing, the Pomodoro method. If you haven't heard of this, it's named after a very silly tomato-shaped kitchen timer. You know those kitchen timers where you twist it, you set it for a certain number of minutes, and then it counts down until it rings at the end. So the Pomodoro method is a way of sort of focusing on a task for a deliberate amount of time. And the way that this works is that you set a timer, let's say for 30 minutes. I like to say 30 minutes here because a GRE verbal section is 30 minutes, and or math section is 35 minutes. So let's say you set a timer for 30 minutes. And the goal is to work only on one task for that 30 minutes. No other distractions can happen. Your phone needs to be off, not just on vibrate off. And that's super important because even if it's, you're going to, in the back of your mind, know you might get a notification that you can see or feel, right? Phone off. So focus for 30 minutes, do the task, now take your little break. And I think what you'll find is you accomplished more in that 30 minutes than you thought you would, because you only had to do it for 30 minutes and you got rid of all the other distractions. So this is the Pomodoro method. Very powerful way to kind of work in a task, especially a task that you don't want to do. And as we've learned earlier in the course, in the intro, the more hard things we do, the more motivation we get to do more hard things. The third item I have here is small wins. So when we're studying for the GRE, it's a process, right? It's a long process, maybe months, right? We're not going to really get the big win until the very end when we get our GRE score. And hopefully, it's a score that feels like a win. So it's important to kind of structure some small wins along the way and to celebrate those little victories. So small win could be like you learned your 100th vocab word, or you did your 100th math problem, or you got a super hard verbal question right, or something. But when you find that thing to kind of, sort of capture as a win, just dwell on it for a few moments and say, all right, this is progress. Write it down in your tracker. Just super helpful way to kind of stay motivated because you have some kind of tangible evidence that what you're doing is working. And you don't want to go overboard with this. Like, not everything is a win. Not everybody gets a trophy, right, in life. You don't want to just kind of call everything a win because it's, make it a legitimate thing that you actually accomplished, not some made up, thing that I know everybody knows isn't real. So going back into studying and like doing problems, kind of a magic number to kind of shoot for. And this is important to get about 80% or more of the problems you're doing that day right. Now this kind of has to be fine-tuned, right, for GRE prep, because it can be very easy to get in over our head right away with some material and find that we're getting a lot of questions wrong. So what I've read in terms of the ideal number of or percentage of problems to get correct to feel motivated is 85%. And this is important because we want the work that we do to kind of like build our skill and build our motivation. We don't want to get discouraged, but we also don't want it to be too easy. And there has to be a little bit of struggle usually to kind of, we want to do hard things, not easy things all the time. So you want to kind of be at the right stage to get about 80% of the questions right. And what this often means is for verbal, go slower. We're using ETS for verbal. There's not too much debate about that in terms of my view, but go slower, make sure you get things right. Start with easier problems. You can use the ETS Big Book for this because there's a difficulty percentage in each answer key for each problem. For math, for some of you, you're going to have to take a step back. You might not be able to do ETS right now. You might not be able to do the Manhattan 5-pun book right now, but maybe you can do Big Book. Maybe you can do, an easier level thing, like maybe even Khan Academy, but you got to start with stuff you can do. Then move on to something harder. Take your time with it. Build your confidence. Don't hurt your confidence. Now, number 5 is an interesting one, intermittent rewards. We've talked a little bit about rewards in this course. And after you do a legitimate hard thing that's a real accomplishment, maybe give yourself a little reward. Maybe it could be something like you get to, go on Instagram for 10 minutes or whatever it is. Make it something that really does feel like a reward. But the interesting thing about this, and this is something that casinos all know, is that if rewards are given out randomly, the motivation to do the task that might generate that reward is so much higher. And this is why people get addicted to gambling. If the reward happened every time, there wouldn't be that sort of compulsion involved. So what we can do to kind of hack this for ourselves is to maybe have roll a dice or a die, and maybe, if you get a 4, you don't get a reward that day for your thing. Or maybe, and just make it random a little bit. Or maybe even make it a little more random than that. You want to reward yourself, let's say, most of the time. So maybe 1 in 6 times, or every time there's a 1 in 6 chance that you don't get a reward. And this will keep you more motivated than if you just, boom, you get a reward every time you do something. It's just a hack to try. These are all kind of experiments, some of which will work better for some people than others. And then our final one here, visualizing success and visualizing failure. So it might seem a little weird of me to suggest that you visualize failure, but both of these can be very powerful motivators in their own way. And I think you'll discover that they both can motivate you. If you take the time to visualize, the amazing life you're going to have once you have your graduate degree, or maybe, when you've been in your, the job that you want for several years, and you've got a cool house and, a family and whatever else you want to, achieve in life. That's a pretty good motivator. It's exciting to think about those things that, and you realize GRE is kind of like a stepping stone to get there. But you can also be careful with this, maybe, if you're a sensitive person, but you can also visualize failure. Like, what's going to happen if you don't? Now, where are you going to live? Now what kind of life are you going to have? And think about the repercussions of not studying. Now, this doesn't have to be dire. It just might be that guess what? This year, next time, you're doing the exact same thing because you didn't get it. You didn't get into school the first time. And that's pretty good motivation, right? Like, how much would that suck? You have to do the exact same thing you're doing now a year from now and study for the test all over again. So both of those can be powerful motivators. Just kind of visualize, take a few moments and do that. And I think you're going to, increase some of your internal drive if you focus on, what really the results of your prep. What are those results going to be, whether it goes well or not? So if you think about all these mental hacks, they're all things that you can do periodically and or daily to increase your motivation and make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.